Hello everybody, as you know I have now completed Warhammer 40,000 Armageddon Da Orks, and I will give you a summary video with my thoughts. Overall I would give it maybe a 5 or 6 out of 10, not a terrible game, and if you like playing the Orcs and are into Warhammer 40,000, it may be worth your money, especially if you can get it on sale. There's clearly some balancing issues, but in this game, they're actually in your favor because the orcs overall are overpowered, so it doesn't feel quite as bad as it did on the DLC missions for the base game of Armageddon. Things that I liked about this game is they really were very generous with the requisition points. Therefore, you could really play the orcs like they're meant to be. You could experiment with different units and really slam them into the enemy line, suffer some casualties, and that wouldn't be quite as devastating as it was for the Imperial Guard. The problem was is this was a blind playthrough, so I didn't really understand that until late in the game. By that time, it became essential that you had experienced units, and I didn't have them, so it was too late for me to start trialing with different units. I also liked that some of the game designs and the level designs actually were quite interesting, and it really felt how I envisioned Warhammer 40,000 to be. You know, orcs going against these fortified positions, Imperial Guardsmen or Space Marines sitting there trying to defend against overwhelming waves, and just getting slammed into the orcs. So I thought that was fun. I also like that, I don't have a problem with the bonus missions per se, but I don't like that they're quote unquote secret. So in this game, some of the objectives, they would just say, hey, FYI, there's a bonus objective here. You know, if you go do these things, we'll get you an additional unit or something to help you in the future levels. And they're clearly optional. On the other DLCs that I've played so far, you really have to complete the optional missions, and they're extremely challenging because they give you units that you won't have access to otherwise, and they're quite essential. For example, the super heavies on the Orc Hunter campaign. Without those, it would have been nearly impossible to beat that game easily. So that was very frustrating. But in this one, it's like, oh, there, you can get an extra super heavy, or you can get this tank, or what have you. But if you don't get it, it's not the end of the world. I thought it was also nice to get an insight to some of the mechanics and balancing issues here. Clearly, they pumped this game out that you're playing the other side. I don't think they fixed a lot of the balancing issues, so you really got an understanding of why it feels like on the harder difficulties of the original game, why the orcs have unlimited units. And the problem is one, it doesn't cost them a whole lot to purchase the units, and two, with such a generous amount of requisition points for the orcs, they're able to just unlimitedly reinforce. I also like that the Space Marines and the Imperial Guards didn't have the ability to indefinitely reinforce themselves because, especially on the harder missions, it was hard enough to beat it already, and if they would have been reinforcing the entire time as they're sitting there not moving, it would have been nearly impossible to beat the level. The things I didn't like about this game um, is I felt it started way too easy, and then by the end it was incredibly difficult. And as I alluded to earlier, you really had to have experienced troops by the end of the game. And by the end of it, because I'd become so had so many requisition points, I kind of got sloppy. So I had to keep going back and rebeating levels to try to keep some of the experienced units. And because the Titans just regularly would be one-shotted until you get the more experienced ones, and that's probably my main complaint with this DLC, is even when you're playing as the Imperial Guard, the Orc Titans kind of suck. They really are just, you know, not good. They could barely kill any infantry. They could sometimes damage certain vehicles and things, but they were just really weak. And then when you have the very hard difficulty where they get additional units, they have so many super heavies. They just go in there and one shot all your titans. It becomes just incredibly frustrating. It's like I need these units to be leveled up and get experience so I can go through this level without being massacred, but at the same time you're one-shotting everybody. It's like, this is insane. It just leads to a level of frustration. And they didn't give you the best, the quote-unquote best, because they're still kind of suck. Titans until too late in the game, so you couldn't upgrade the Titans into something better. So that was just incredibly frustrating. I felt the writing was pretty average for this game. Some parts really felt like it was what I envisioned the orcs, but most of it wasn't. I thought it was just kind of awkward. For example, when you'd have the orcs that would want to be screaming wall, sometimes they would just like give this gargled yell, like they didn't quite know what the whole point of it was, so they never really talked to the voice actors. I felt like to tell them what that was. Um, Probably my biggest issue with this game is, and this was present on some of the other ones as well, is units won't get aggroed. They won't come and attack you. It's so frustrating. They'll sit here, be stuck in buildings, get all these cover bonuses, and you can't get in there and kill them. And there's so many of them when you have to go and say, "Oh, wipe the map with all these units," and they just sit there. Oh, nothing frustrates me more than that. And I thought that was just an incredibly poor design. I've ranted and raved on this on my other summary, so I won't go into it so much here, because if you watch the game or you played the game on the harder difficulties, you've known this as well. Really, the way to get around this is to purchase some cheaper units. Now, after the end of my summary here, I'm going to give some tips that I wish I would have known retrospectively, and I'll go into that in a little more detail. Um, and so, because the units don't get aggroed, it really can sometimes lead to rather monotonous gameplay, and it can just feel kind of boring. So, just some general tips here, like I said, that I wish I would have known when starting this game, because it was a blind playthrough, is really be more protective of your troops. By the end of it, I was like, oh, I have all these requisition points, I'm never going to use them, so just kept reinforcing or buying new units. And by the end of the game, that was such a huge mistake, and I didn't want to go back and play even more missions because I already had to go back because I had suffered so many Titan casualties and things. It just, by the end of it, I was pulling my hair out a little bit. Uh, the biggest thing, and this is my own fault, is I just didn't even realize that Morkanauts and Gorkanauts weren't Titans. They were classified as walkers in this game, and I just went crazy. I just bought so many of them, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna convert these into a whole Titan army. It's gonna be amazing." And you couldn't do it because you couldn't cross the classes like that, because I didn't realize the Morkanaut Gorkanauts weren't the Titans. So by the end of the game, they just aren't powerful enough. I have this completely undiversified army that can't do crap against the Space Marines. So it was just a terrible decision on my part. It made, 80% of the game way too easy, just blowing through it with those. But then by the end of it, it just like was slamming into a wall, and I immediately regretted my decisions there. And I just sacrificed some of my infantry, the power knobs, and the um, what were they called, war bosses. And I'm like, whatever, these guys don't matter. I'm just using them for getting leadership bonuses and things like that. But really, you need infantry in this game, especially because those units, as we talked about earlier, don't aggro. You need to be able to go in there, and knobs are able to get in there. They have good range. They have good close quarters combat. So that would be a good way to go with the Mega Armor Knobs. Or Goth Guards are actually really powerful as well, and I think that would be another excellent choice. Now, they don't have a range attack, so they might be harder to level up, but certainly with their incredible close quarters combat, that would be the way to go. And the other way you can do this is, because the infantry and other units won't be aggroed, you actually have to put one of your guys to just keep one that's not leveled up and put it somewhere that's visible to the units. They'll all come out after and try to kill that unit. And this is what I had to do when I went back and played some of the levels that I didn't record, because it was just because I was getting so frustrated with the game. I didn't want to keep going through, because it takes quite a bit of time to edit out all the saves, resaves, loading, and things like that to get rolls the way you want it to be. Because in this game, um, that's the damage is way too variable. Um, but yeah, you just put them somewhere so all the enemy units see it. They'll swarm on that guy. You'll put your heavy armored units, which will be so heavily armored that they actually won't even be aggroed by the infantry or other units. Or sometimes the enemy units want to get through to attack those units, like the infantry or artillery, that they'll actually slam themselves against your titans and other super heavies and just get themselves destroyed. And pretty much that's what needs to happen for you to be able to beat some of these levels. Because without the units being aggroed, you just can't get there with a very extremely limited nature that some of these games are, which by itself is kind of a stupid design in my opinion, but I'll try not to ramble too much. Tank busters would also be a good idea in this game. I wish I would have stayed with it. I kind of experimented with a couple of units, but I'm like, oh, this is stupid. Just keep the Gorkanauts going, Morkanauts, because they're doing way more damage. But I didn't realize just how many super heavies, titans, and other units we were going to have to fight in this game. And because you do have the requisition points, you can take out those units, get a bunch of experience, probably replenish your losses. So they would have been a very viable unit. And with their range of 3, they can outshoot some units. So certainly, in retrospect, I wish I would have had a couple of those. Now, it may have been I didn't actually experiment with this, so this is more a speculation, but I just had the super long range artillery, but there was another artillery piece that actually had some big shooters on it with a range of 3. And so if you're not going to try to do the infantry aggro, as I just discussed, it may be an idea to just keep a diversified both super long range so you can take out the super heavies and titans, but then the ones with the shooters as well, because you can position them 3 away from the Imperial Guard, and then you'll get not only the artillery fire, but the machine gun fire as well, and that may help you tear up some more infantry units. As you can see by my playthrough at the end of the game, using those Titans are critically important because the Space Marines, they're really the only thing that can fight a Space Marine and some of the other units without being completely destroyed. So don't be lazy like me. Don't let your Titans get blown up on every dang level and not get experience. And then by the time when you really need them and you're able to upgrade them, not have experienced units because you get into this false sense of security with all these requisition points. It's just not worth it, and it makes the end of the game nearly impossible if you haven't done it right. So don't do that. Protect your Titans, and you may even have to reload if your Titans keep getting destroyed. Um, the only other thought I had is on the bonus objectives. They usually give you some sort of vehicle, and most of the time I just canceled them out and got rid of them, got a little bit of points back, and that was kind of the end of it because my Gorkanauts and Morkanauts were powerful enough that I just felt like they weren't necessary. However, in retrospect, another way that you could potentially try to aggro units, but now this won't work for most of the infantry because they still won't be aggroed, but you could potentially convert those experienced vehicles into super heavy, so then you can have um, very experienced super heavy tanks. There's one that has both an infantry and then the other one had las cannons for more of a vehicle unit, but you could try to use those to try to aggro some of the other units instead of relying purely on infantry because they'll be able to take more of a hit, but saying that some of the Imperial Guard units won't be aggroed enough with the super heavy because it's still, the game says, oh, even if I attack this, I can't do any damage, so they won't go after it. But that's another thought, and especially if you like the super heavies, I'd certainly recommend completing the bonus objectives and then just using some points to upgrade them, because as long as it's in the same class, like tanks or vehicles, um, you can convert them in, but you can't go from like walkers to titans. That's not allowed. Also, retrospectively, I think the combat drills were actually quite good, and I wish I hadn't just let them die and really just threw them away because they really could do quite a bit of damage, especially if they're in a defensive position. And the only way to get through and not have to be overwhelmed by units that are in the trenches or in buildings. If you attack them with a unit that has hand-to-hand combat, then it negates the defensive bonus. Now, originally, I think the game was designed in a way to have a siege mechanic, so certain range units wouldn't also have to worry about that defensive bonus, but for whatever reason, they scrapped that mechanic. So all of a sudden, these units have extensive bonuses, and you just can't do the damage that you need to do. So those are my general tips that I would have for you. The only other thing I'd mention is if there is a bonus objective and you complete it and a unit doesn't appear in the next turn or two, then that means one of your units is on the square or the hex, I guess it would be in this case, that unit spawns. And if that happens, it won't come into the game. So, like on the last mission, I don't think the video I had showed you get the bonus vehicle because my units were on its starting position. I didn't want to keep moving each unit around and try to figure out which hex it was on. But when I did beat the mission, and I don't think that was the one I recorded, where I did get it, I think it was like a eluded annihilator or something like that. I can't even remember because it's been a while since I played this game. Um, so just be aware of that, because especially if you do want to try to upgrade it to a super heavy and get all those experience, or even just experiment with a different unit, make sure that you don't lose out on it by having your units on that same. So hopefully this helped you, gives you an idea of how to play this game and how to be successful, especially in the later missions, so you won't be nearly as frustrated and get ready to rage quit like I did. I actually had to take a break from this game, and I actually played the Sons of Cadia campaign, which is why um, it took me so long to do this summary video, as I just needed to take a break from this game because I got so frustrated with it. But it's an okay game. Like I said, fairly average. If you're into Warhammer 40,000, you like the orcs, you don't necessarily want to play on the hardest difficulty, you're probably going to get a little bit of enjoyment out of it. If you're going to play on the hardest difficulties like I do, um, it's going to make you want to rage quit on several occasions. It is possible, but definitely is very, very frustrating. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. It gives you a couple ideas on what you might want to do if you're going to play this game, or try to challenge yourself by doing it on the hardest difficulty. I put videos out Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If you are enjoying videos like this and my playthroughs, please give my channel a like and subscribe. Have a good day.